We're gonna go over some skeletons, we're gonna go over some birds, but most of all, we're gonna go over wings. So birds aren't too different from us if you really, really look at them, but they are definitely more different than mammals. Because we are mammals, obviously we're closer to the regular mammal, but birds actually aren't as different as you might think when it comes to our skeletons. So the main difference is that the arms become wings, and then there are larger shifts in the skeleton. So it's not as cohesive as mammals are, but the skeletons are quite similar. So let's take a look at them. So if we look at the bird compared to the human, the biggest difference that you might notice, obviously, is that the rib cage is all the way down here. This is the rib cage of the bird. This is our rib cage. The biggest difference is this big shape right here. This shape on us, that's the sternum, right? The sternum, it's like a giant chest plate, right? That's been brought down on the bird. So the bird sternum is all the way down here, while ours is right here. Obviously, we got the spine. The spine starts up here for the neck. Same place over here for us. And they've got a little bit of an extension of their tailbone. Ours just stays the same. And this is their pelvis, which is all the way down here. Ours is right here. Overall, though, generally the same. And another thing you'll notice, humans are plantigrade, right? So we have the heel of our foot all the way down on the ground. But birds, think of this as their knee. This is the heel back here, and these are the toes. Birds are digitigrade. Digitigrade means they stand on their toes, compared to us who stand on the heels of our feet. So their anatomy is slightly shifted. Think of this as their like heel of the foot, and this is their knee. But overall, very, very similar. There's another thing I want to mention, the shape of wings. Let's talk a little bit about that. If we look at a person's hand, let me draw just like a standard, way too fast drawing of an arm. Let's say that this is a person. How you can translate this to a wing is if it's the same structure. The thumb is still there, by the way, and we'll get over that when we look at the skeleton a little bit further in the wings. But think of the fingers as if they've extended all the way down here. If we kind of take a look here at this skeleton, you can kind of think of them as if they only have like 2 fingers right here. This is like their index. This is like their middle finger, and this is the thumb, right? So they do kind of have fingers. It's a little bit different than ours. So you can always think of your wings as like an arm with really long fingers. It's the exact same shape. It's just that the fingers are a lot longer. Same deal with, you know, dragons and bats, right? But this time they do have all their fingers. I think they only got 4 though. So then you can extend your fingers like that. It's almost like you're spreading them out a little bit further. And then you just gotta put the flaps of skin between them. And you got a perfectly good bat/dragon wing. But straight up, this is how wings work, right? If you want to translate it from bird to a person. So let's talk a bit about feathers, because there are lots of different types of feathers. So let me draw my very general looking wing. When you are drawing wings, overall there are a good like 3 to 4 different layers of feathers. We're going to be drawing the outer side of the wings, right? So the back of the wings, not the inside. The inside is really like these main feathers here, and then there's like covering, right? That's like feathery down. These big feathers that are on the outside here, they kind of end around here. These feathers are your primary feathers. So these ones at the tip of the wings are the primary feathers. Let's go into these next sets down here. So this is like the joint, the second joint, right? If this is where the hand starts, this is now the forearm going in there. We'll say that this is the quote-unquote forearm bit of the wing. These are your secondary feathers. And then the next set, closer to the inside, that are all kind of layered very, very close together. This is what kind of helps the transition from the body to the wing. These are your tertiary feathers. So those are the most important ones. If you think of an airplane, these secondary feathers are what help the bird steer, right? Most of the time. These ones are what help them hover, I believe. So the next one, these inner ones right here, these are your primary coverts. And then there's a little row of feathers kind of right here. It's like 3 of them. There's like 3 feathers right here that kind of overlay like that. These are the alula. These are the feathers that are attached to the quote-unquote thumb of the bird, right? So if you can think of, like, again, that hand, these are the feathers that are attached to the thumb, and the rest of them is the hand. So you can kind of think of it like that. So we have our secondary feathers here. Above the secondary feathers, there's a bunch of different layers of feathers here. There's maybe 1, and then there's 2, and then there's 3. All of these extra ones in here is our secondary coverts. They all technically have names. I'm not going to go over them. They're all the secondary coverts. It's just they all have another word in front of them each time. And then the final layer of feathers that I am going to talk about, kind of layers like that, something like that. And these are the scalpulars. So these are your feathers that generally come onto a bird that you see on 90% of birds. Obviously, they don't look exactly like this. There's more nuance to them, but the structure is generally the same. Sometimes, depending on the type of feather, they'll be bigger or smaller. But yeah, so all feathers of the wing contribute to helping a bird fly, and the size and position will change based on the wing type and the type of bird. But overall, kind of the same. Alright, now let's get into the wings. So this is the part that I like when we talk about all these fun kinds of wings, because I love drawing wings. So let's talk about all those wings. There are 5 different types of wing shapes. Number 1 are your passive soaring wings. They have really long primary feathers and the slots. There are slots in these feathers, so there are spaces between these primary feathers, and those help these birds catch thermals, or columns of hot air that kind of come up from the ground. And this allows the bird to soar just a little bit higher. Kind of like a glide suit, but there's another type of wing that it mimics that a little bit better. So these passive soaring wings are generally had by eagles, hawks, vultures, and other birds have, right? But those are kind of the primary ones. So let's look at a bird with those kinds of feathers. This is the bearded vulture. It's one of the largest vultures, and people like to call it the dragon bird because it looks a lot like a dragon. You can see what I mean by those really big spaces between the feathers, right? Especially over here, you can look between the primaries of this bird, and they're really, really far apart, and that really helps it soar very, very large distances, or it helps it soar very, very high. This bird is also known as the bone-eating bird because it will eat bones. This bird is hardcore. I love the bearded vulture. All right, number 2. These are active soaring wings. So active soaring wings are super, super long and super, super narrow. These wings help birds to soar for very long periods of time, and they're very dependent on wind currents to fly, which is a downside, right? You'll notice these birds that have active soaring wings don't flap their wings very often because they are usually depending on the current that is around them, the wind current, to help them soar around. So the birds that have these kinds of feathers: albatross, gulls, gannets, and often most kinds of seafaring birds. So a lot of birds that you might see by water have active soaring wings. And the reason for that is because usually a lot of great wind currents happen around the water. So this next bird is the albatross. You can think of the albatross as a prettier seagull, but these things are huge. Their wingspan, I believe, is up to about 20 feet. I could be wrong. It's a really, really long wingspan, but you notice these wings, super, super long and super, super thin. And this is what helps it glide very, very far, right? This length and this thin kind of nature is what allows it to soar for very, very long periods of time and allows it to, hover very nicely on wind currents. The next set of wings we are going to be talking about are ellipticals. So your elliptical wings are best for short bursts of speed, and they allow for really tight maneuvering and fast takeoffs, but the speed cannot be maintained. So they can go really fast, they can take off really fast, and they can maneuver around things really, really easily, but their speed cannot be maintained. So their speed isn't quite as... They can have really fast takeoffs, but they can't keep that speed forever. So the birds that have elliptical wings, if you want some more, wow, what's the word? Examples, there we go. Are crows, ravens, blackbirds, and sparrows, and so on and so forth. There are lots of birds that have elliptical wings. And the elliptical bird that we are going to be talking about is the pied crow. Fun fact, this is a crow that is technically legal to have as a pet. So elliptical wings also have that kind of, they can kind of have those spaces between the feathers over here, but you'll notice that they're very flat kind of around the bottom, a little more arched on the top, right? When you look at a lot of these wings, you can probably look up images of them. You'll notice that these ones tend to be a little bit shorter and a little bit plumper. These ones tend to be kind of long and intense and graceful. These ones are really, really long. But these guys tend to be a little bit shorter. Their wings are a little bit stumpier. Number 4, high-speed wings. So your high-speed wings are long and thin, but they are not as long as active soaring wings. So they're still long, but not nearly as long as like a seagull's wings or something like that. And these wings, obviously, based on the name, they are incredibly fast and they can maintain the speed for long, long periods of time. These ones are the swifts, ducks, falcons, terns, sandpipers, so on and so forth. Generally, all these little birds that you kind of see around you, a lot of them tend to be high-speed wings. This is the American kestrel. Really, really cute. Think of like a chibi falcon. That's what the kestrel is. It's very small and very fluffy. The kestrel is one of the fastest birds. I think it is a cousin of the falcon. But again, right, these high-speed wings, they are quite long. compared to the stubby nature of the elliptical wings, right? These wings are quite long and thin to help with speed, but they aren't as intense as active soaring wings where they don't need to rely on wind currents quite as much for their wings. The final kind of wing we are talking about is hovering wings. So your hovering wings tend to be very, very small and very, very quick. And the nerves and muscles within this bird and these wings are adapted for incredibly fast movement so that the bird can hover, right? The only way that other birds can hover is if they have a proper gust of wind for it, right? Active soaring birds can kind of hover in place. And really, the only bird, I think there's more than this, but the only bird that I can really think of that has these wings are hummingbirds. And here is where our last bird is, the ruby-throated hummingbird, which is kind of very, very common. But once again, these wings, very, very small and very, very speedy. And they're very, very light so that they can move them very, very fast. They tend to be kind of in the shape of a triangle of sorts. So that's what these hummingbirds are for. But last but not least, let's talk about owls. Owls are a strange exception. So they're kind of in between those two. Some of them are a little bit more stubby, some of them are a lot wider, but overall, they're not 100% able to fit into any of these categories most of the time. So their wing types, if you had to guess, are probably the most similar to passive soaring and elliptical.
Tune into our weekly live streams for art tips and demos in real time. Subscribe and hit that little bell to get notifications for when we're live. Join a virtual class to learn live from our professional artists. Get creative assignments, individual guidance, and real-time feedback on your artwork. Start today and level up your practice. If you learned something new, like and share this with a fellow art nerd. If you love receiving quality and free arts education, subscribe. If you enjoyed this video, here's a couple other videos you can check out next.